Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Catalyze Yourself. I am Gayatri, and today we are turning our attention to that quiet force that actually shapes us over time: consistency. Over the last few episodes, we have explored what it means to break through our barriers and to design our legacy with intention and to lead beyond our own selves. Those moments matter. They give us clarity, courage, and a sense of possibility. But if we stop there, we will miss something important. Because the truth is, breakthrough moments, as powerful as they feel, do not stand alone and don't take hold on their own. They can spark the change, but they cannot sustain itself. What actually builds us is the intentional choosing of presence of mind again and again when life pulls us away, which it will. And the reinforcement that comes when our nervous system learns to trust that choice. Consistency does not feel dramatic, and it rarely gets celebrated, but it is the steady practice that makes a single moment of courage or clarity and integrates it into the person we are becoming. And that's where today's conversation will take us. And for that, we must start with this question. If consistency is what builds us, then why does it feel so difficult to live it out and practice? Why do we find ourselves starting strong and then slipping and then questioning why we couldn't keep it going? And then perhaps choosing to drop it versus keeping it going. Part of the answer lies in how our nervous system is wired. We are drawn to what is new, urgent, or different. Our attention locks into difference, novelty, because in survival terms, novelty could mean a threat or an opportunity for safety. A new sound in the night, a sudden movement, an unfamiliar place, an unfamiliar face. Our system is built to notice it. And here's the paradox. While our attention is drawn to novelty, we also fight change. Acting on change means moving into uncertainty, and uncertainty feels risky. So our nervous system does two things at once. It notices what is new, and it resists leaving the safety of what is familiar to us. We are pulled towards novelty and then anchored to predictability, all in the same breath. So where does that leave consistency? Consistency is not just repetition. Our nervous system actually prefers efficient patterns once they're established. That is why habits, even unhelpful ones, can be so hard to break. The problem is, when we try to build consistency around something new, our nervous system does not trust it yet, and it tags that unfamiliar pattern as extra effort until it becomes safe. And that's why consistency can start to feel like a chore. And there are a few reasons for it. Our nervous system is always trying to conserve energy. Once something becomes automatic, it is easy to repeat. It takes less energy to operate on autopilot. But until that point, every choice feels heavier. It costs us more energy to show up for it. So we tell ourselves it is hard. And then there's also what happens when a practice is not connected to a meaning that is important to you. Without a why that matters to us, It shows up in our body like one more demand to carry. Instead of giving energy, it takes it away. And to the way our reward system works, novelty lights it up. It feels exciting. It feels worth paying attention to. But repetition does not trigger the same response until and unless we train ourselves to see incremental or small progressions as valuable in its own right. If not, we end up seeing as nothing happening, no reward, and we take away our dopamine reward system. And finally, here's our conditioning around effort. Many of us grew up believing that effort should equal quick results, and that every media that we have access to gives us the same feedback. It's instant gratification, instant results, and consistency rarely works like that. It builds slowly, compounding beneath the surface. When results don't show right away, our nervous system misreads it as wasted effort, when in truth, growth is happening consistently, incrementally. And this is the growth that truly creates the foundation of who you are. And this is why consistency can feel boring or like a chore or drudgery. It isn't because we are weak. It's because our nervous system has not yet learned that steady repetition is to learn something new, is safe, meaningful, and rewarding. And this is where the reframing begins, because once we see consistency differently, we stop fighting against it as a chore and begin to recognize it as the way our system builds trust. If we've been taught to think of consistency as a checklist, did I do it or not? It will always feel like pressure. Consistency is not a task we cross off. It's a relationship we build with our values, with our commitment, our word to ourselves, with a promise we make to ourselves, and with the practice we keep meeting. And for a relationship to flourish, we have to prioritize it, be intentional with it, and we have to nourish it. And if we think of any relationship we have as a chore, it is only a matter of time before it disintegrates. Relationships grow through our presence of mind, and consistency is a relationship we build with ourselves so we can evolve and grow and take on new lessons and patterns that we need in the moment. From here, a few quiet assumptions begin to loosen. One is the belief that consistency is boring. What looks the same from the outside is rarely the same on the inside. We are not the same person today that we were yesterday. Therefore, the moment in front of us is not the same either. The variables have changed. When we meet a practice again, we are bringing a little bit more context, a little bit more steadiness, a little bit more honesty, a little bit more practice. The action may look familiar. The encounter with this specific iteration or repetition is new. Another assumption is that consistency restricts us. In practice, what it does, it creates freedom. It frees up our time for something else. When we recenter in what matters, we spend less energy debating ourselves and reacting to whatever is the loudest. Instead of rebuilding our foundation each time, we strengthen it and we stand on it. The space that opens is where clarity and creativity can thrive. And there's this idea that consistency demands perfection. It doesn't. Consistency is not and has never been about perfection. And consistency is not about never drifting from a pattern that you're working on. Consistency is about how you return to it. We will drift. We are human. We will have ebbs and flows, times where our motivational energy is high and other times when it is low, times when our physical energy is high and other times when it is low. The work is to come back kindly, respectfully, and steadily without the story of judgment and a miss that is considered as a collapse or the end of everything. Underneath all of this is our nervous system's learning curve. At first, a new pattern will look like extra effort. Our system has just not learned to trust it. And with repetition, we begin to teach our body, our mind, our nervous system, this is safe, this is meaningful, and this is worth our energy. And that repetition becomes reinforcement. We will start noticing small little markers if you're aware. Maybe it is a tense scenario that you're practicing to respond with more clarity. So as you practice, you will notice small markers like, oh, you're not breathing heavy in a tense moment. You are speaking a little bit more clearer when before words were just tumbling out of your mouth. You will notice that before, when your language would have been harsh in a conversation, now it is a little bit more transparent, respectful, clear, and nuanced. Over time, what felt heavy starts to feel lighter and easier. We haven't forced ourselves into a routine. What we have done is we've helped our system, our mind, body, and nervous system settle. And if you see it this way, consistency stops being about routine and becomes about renewal, recentering when life pulls us off balance, and reinforcing those nervous system pathways that lets us live from what matters. And this is how small, steady choices become who we are, not the promises we make, but the patterns we embody and choose to behave based on or act on. And based on what I have learned, my blueprint of conscious leadership, the SIRE model, gives us a repeatable pattern we can integrate. So our nervous system begins to experience consistency as support, not pressure. Let us look at an example, something many of us want but struggle to sustain, which is maybe starting the day with a clear intention. We wake up and almost without thinking, our hand reaches for our phone. There's emails, there may be social media alerts, there may be to-dos, your calendar that you go and check to see what the day is bringing. And this sets the tone before you've even had a chance to decide how you want to show up for the day. When we practice consistency through SIRE, this moment can shift. We notice the pull of autopilot, that urge to open the inbox before we even sit up. And that noticing is the first step. That is self-awareness. And when we choose, instead of chasing urgency, to reconnect to what actually matters, maybe today it's clarity over speed. Maybe it is respect in every conversation. Maybe it is trusting space instead of control. Maybe we write it down or we hold it in our mind as our intention for the day, for a breath. Now, our nervous system has an anchor that feels purposeful. You know what that is? That is self-inspiration. You grounding yourself to what really matters to you. Though, with all of that, the reality of our lives is, depending on how the day is going, we can forget this clear intention we set for the day. And we may have started moving through the day before we caught ourselves, before we catch ourselves. And this is where recentering matters. We pause, we halt, we notice we are in avoidance, perhaps because the pressure of the day caught up to us. And that is the moment we can choose to rise, to recognize, reset the intention, take a deep breath, and evaluate what needs to shift. And then we shift. We stop and highlight the intention we set, and we flow back into the day, and we trust ourselves through this process of recentering. You know what that is? That's our self-regulation. And as the day unfolds, we let that intention be visible. It sits on top of our thoughts. We bring it into the language during a meeting. For clarity, here's what we are deciding. We use it to guide our tone in a difficult conversation. And you know what that is? That's self-expression. And maybe at the end of the day, or perhaps periodically during the day, we take that moment to ask, did the intention help us? Did it change how we moved? Where did we drift? What would tomorrow's intention be? Each moment of reflection reinforces your practice, so the nervous system begins to expect it and not resist it. That is self-reflection. And this is how the SIRE model helps you build consistency. The practice isn't perfect, but over time, the body and mind learn. This is safe, this is meaningful, and this is worth repeating. And once we see it in something as ordinary as starting the day with intention, we realize the same pattern applies to bigger choices. When we practice making decisions that align with our self-inspiration, choosing dignity over approval, choosing long-term growth over short-term discomfort, the same arc is at work. We notice the impulse, we reconnect to the why, we recenter with the halt, rise, and shift, and we express it with clarity, and then we reflect to keep the momentum, to keep building, to keep recentering. Consistency isn't willpower, and it is not dependent on your motivation that can ebb and flow. Consistency is learning to use a repeatable pattern again and again until the nervous system trusts it. And this recentering within us happens in the quietest of ways. Think about that parent who listens to their child with curiosity and interest. The child may not remember every word, but they grow up knowing my voice matters. I am heard in this relationship. That safety doesn't come through one breakthrough talk. It comes from a nervous system that has been reinforced again and again consistently to expect presence. Or it could be a friend who keeps reaching out with small, steady check-ins. How are you doing? I was thinking of you. Over time, those moments tell our nervous system, this person values their connection with me. Or it could be that leader who reflects openly after something has not gone exactly as planned. Instead of covering up or blaming, they consistently share what they have learned and how they will adjust. That pattern creates psychological safety. It tells the nervous system of everyone around that leader that it is safe to grow and it is safe to learn out loud. What these examples show us is that consistency isn't something we practice just for ourselves. It is something others feel in us also. Our nervous system is always scanning for safety or threat, and it's often below our level of conscious thought and awareness. When our presence is steady, when our words and actions align over time, we now create conditions where other people's systems, nervous systems, can get steady and relax also. And that is what conscious leaders do. Conscious leaders create the conditions that allow themselves and those around them to bring their best to any scenario they're in. And that is also where trust comes from, not from one random dramatic gesture, but from the nervous system learning through repetition. This person is reliable, the space is safe. And that is the power of consistency. And when we think about the quiet power of consistency, it is worth asking, what is all of this really building in us? Because it is not about keeping perfect streaks or never drifting. It is about what steady practices shape us and those around us over time. Consistency begins to integrate our self-inspiration, our values into who we are. What we return to again and again does not just stay at the level of action. It settles into our identity. When we keep choosing presence of mind and we don't just practice it, we become present in the moment that we are in. When we choose to keep respect, we don't just act respectfully. We become someone others feel safe with. It also builds trust with ourselves. Every time we center after drifting, we are reinforcing a deeper message in our nervous system. I can show up again. I don't have to collapse when I miss once. I am someone I can count on. And that trust in ourselves is one of the most powerful space we can be in. And consistency builds trust with others. People rarely remember one great moment. They remember the pattern we lived. Did we show up steadily? Did our words and actions align over time? When they see that, their nervous system relaxes also. That's when safety and reliability start to grow around us. Consistency also gives us a steadier base for change. We know this. Life brings us disruption, conflict, chaos. But when we have trained our nervous system, our mind, body, and nervous system with consistency to be self-aware, to be self-inspired, to be self-regulated, to express with your integrated self, and to self-reflect, we meet those moments differently. We don't get tossed around. We don't get manipulated. We remain grounded to navigate what is coming our way as effectively as possible. And maybe most freeing of all, consistency takes us out of performance. It is not about proving we can do something. It is about recentering when we drift and reinforcing the patterns that matter most to us. And now we bring this conversation to a close. Let's take a moment to summarize what we've been sitting with. Consistency is not the need to get something perfect, nor the demand to get it right every time. It is a relationship we build with our own selves, one that steadies our nervous system, one that reinforces our values and self-inspiration, and one that slowly shapes who we are and who we are becoming. It is the quiet patterning of our nervous system through repetition, the recentering when we drift, reinforcing what matters until presence and alignment become just part of who we are. And so here are a few questions for us to reflect on. What are the choices we keep making, the ones that quietly define us as we move through the day to day? How do we steady our practices, even the smallest ones, and begin to build trust with ourselves and with others? And when we notice ourselves moving away, dropping something, drifting away from what we are working on to build consistency in, how do we respond to it? How willing are we to come back to presence and recenter without shutting down or collapse or considering it a failure? Consistency builds us in a way that can be easy to overlook. However, it is one of the most steadying factors that our nervous system can utilize for strength. It steadies our nervous system, it integrates our values into our identity and creates reliability and credibility that others can feel. And this gives us such a strong foundation to stand on. And that groundedness matters because life is not orderly. Disruption, conflict, and uncertainty are all around us. And the question becomes, how do we move through it without losing ourselves? And that is where we will go next. In our next episode, in episode 30, we will focus on how each of us can navigate through chaos, how we stay steady when life moves fast, disruptions and changes come at us, and the outcomes do not feel clear. I'm Gayatri, and I'm grateful for the time we have shared today. Until next time, keep recentering with care, keep reinforcing what matters, and keep choosing the kind of steadiness that quietly builds us consistently.